if you are ready to talk, and you can give me a quick sound check.
Hello, world.
All right, very cool. So, with me is Knockback, and you've been with the game for quite some time.
10 years. Believe it or not.
I believe it. Do you remember the first quest you worked on?
The first quest I worked on some of the Shavarath quests, sort of finishing them off. And then I did the Cerulean Hills quests, like the ones with the orcs, that came out with free to play.
All right, very cool. Let me invite you.
Yes.
Sweet, and I will just put together a few members of the general public here as well can join us as we run the quest here. And what we're going to run is the first quest in Age of Rage. I sort of thought it might be an appropriate one because it really is a bit of a lead-in to what's going on in Sharn here, right?
Exactly. So the Age of Rage pack is what will lead us into Sharn because the Stormreach Beacon has been stolen. And if you remember your Age of Rage, in the middle of that pack, you found out that the Stormreach Beacon was shipped to Sharn by the halflings who stole it.
Nice.
And so off you'll go to Sharn to track it down.
All right. I just want to mention for those in chat, I will invite people who were in my group last time. I'm not putting a hard stop on that, but I would prefer to get some new names in there, just so that everyone has an opportunity. So I'm going to, if you have not yet hit up the LFM on Argadessen. Zentradi is my character name, and you'll just see the LFM there, and we'll take a few folks, possibly who were not in the last time. Unless no one else shows up, in which case you guys are welcome back. Oh, and why am I in the harbor?
That's right. I'm at House B.
So, Age of Rage is, like we said, the lead-in and a bit to Sharn. So let's try to talk a little bit about what some of the players in this particular drama are.
Well, Sharn is a vast city with many different factions and groups. And our pack will include some, but far from all of them. You will interact a bit with the Sharn City Council and the mayor, who run the city, although the mayor really only runs the city in name only. You will encounter the Boromar clan, which you already know a great deal about, but not under that name. You will see a little bit of a group called the Aurum, which again has appeared in DDO before. And then there will be somebody who is, well, new to Sharn, but not to DDO. And you encountered, in the winter, in the quest that took you under the sea, the Lucian Vaunt's company, Vaunt Arcanotechnic.
Okay.
And that Vaunt Arcanotechnic will play a role in the expansion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nice. Nice. So, not everybody is necessarily particularly aware of the Eberron campaign setting. Oh,
okay.
Hello. We are going to start by doing Night Falls on Stormreach.
I gotta turn off the celebration so I can get in double sounds.
Sorry, yeah, I know, right? That's the only problem with me embedding it in there, is it's causing me problems too. All right, so first off, how does Sharn fit into the overall world of Eberron?
So Sharn is on the continent of Corvair, which is the main humanoid continent, and it's the biggest humanoid city in Eberron. And it is the richest city in the world. It's the most populous city in the world. It is the center of all sorts of business. And it's where things happen. So you're leaving the comparative backwater of Stormreach to head to the big city.
Is it the political center of Eberron?
Not necessarily. It's a bit like the United States, and Sharn is New York, and the actual capital isn't in Sharn, but Sharn has a lot of clout regardless, just because it's so big and so rich.
Right. So it's really a matter of, and this is a common theme in Eberron, it's really a matter of who's got the biggest cash to kind of pay people off and make things happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are groups and people in Sharn who could buy and sell the Corn Lords in Stormreach with no problem whatsoever. Sharn was not touched very much by the last war, which was this giant war that tore apart Corvair. And it's remained unscathed, almost unscathed, and has just become all the richer and more powerful because of that.
Nice. So, it's called, colloquially, the City of Towers. Does it have the tallest towers in Eberron?
So, yes, Sharn is the City of Towers. Let me just turn my sound off. There we go. Sharn is the City of Towers. Sharn is able to sustain giant towers through magic, which is not possible elsewhere in Eberron, because Sharn is in a confluence. It's not a confluence zone. Somebody help me out here. Manifest zone. Thank you. Yeah. Manifest zone for the plane of Syriania, okay. Which makes levitation magic much easier. So you can hold up giant, essentially skyscrapers with that kind of magic.
And that's how they get their super tall towers. It's not so much building prowess as magical prowess.
Well, it's a combination of the two.
The district guardhouse lies ahead, but its door is shut tight.
I'm sitting here talking instead of hanging out with a group.
Welcome to weekly live streaming. This is always what it's like for me.
Yep.
I wander, and there you go. It is surprisingly more challenging than you'd think to multitask sometimes and do this. But
I can definitely report on that because I'm incapacitated. So if anyone,
yeah,
the real irony
to
is
Steel Star, your character was a quick created character just for the purposes of this event. Most of the team, for obvious reasons, doesn't want to use their actual play characters on the live stream. So
yes. Should probably not stand in the blade barrier.
So, is it that in Sharn there are a lot of long-standing political factions that sort of control Sharn, or is it an ever-changing group of power players?
There are a number of political factions within Sharn. There's also, the House Wards, House Tarasco, House Yarlin, etc. Also have representation in. But there are other groups that are specific to Sharn, not found elsewhere in Eberron. And one of those groups is the Boromar clan, which is a group of halflings originally from the Talenta Plains, who moved to Sharn some years ago, and are now very important politically in the city, as well as running one of the biggest gangs in the city. And you guys already know the Boromar clan, except you call them the Sharn Syndicate.
Right.
And they are, in fact, the ones we were just fighting a member of the Sharn Syndicate on top of those rooftops.
Now, when we look at the very older adventure pack, the Sharn Syndicate, is that the same group?
Yes, it's the same group. So what happened back in the Sharn Syndicate quest, which incidentally I also worked on 10 years ago, essentially, is that the Mormar clan sent a group to Stormreach to try and branch out, to try and establish their own, family outpost in Stormreach, and you defeated them at that time and prevented them from expanding into Stormreach. But now you're going into their, home territory, where again they are firmly entrenched in the political system, extremely powerful. They're not unchallenged, though. There are other gangs. One of those other gangs is called Dosk. And Dosk is a group of monstrous humanoids allied with Droam, which is the monster kingdom in Corvair. We've already encountered Droam in DDO as well, of course.
One of my favorite, one of my personal favorites, by the way. I love Droam in the Eberron setting. Yeah.
So Dosk, the monstrous humanoid gang, and the Sharn Syndicate, the Bormark, are bitter rivals in Sharn, and are constantly fighting back and forth.
So you had mentioned the power players didn't just use political will, but also criminal will as well. Is that true, then, that some of the actual political or sort of power players in Sharn also are mixed into the criminal underworld?
If you want to get anywhere in Sharn, you have to make certain people happy. So, if you're trying to get ahead in Sharn, you need to either make the Bormark clan happy or Dosk happy. One of the two. Pick a side. And like I said, anybody who comes to Sharn will have to get involved with those factions, one way or the other.
All right, so we have announced the name of our next expansion is the Masterminds of Sharn. We don't want to get into spoilers here, but specifically we are talking about some of these power players as the Masterminds?
Yes. Like I said, there's a variety of different players. Bormark clan is one group. The Aurum, which is a shadowy and it depends who you talk to. According to some people, it's a shadowy and mysterious group of the most powerful people in the world who secretly rule the world. If you talk to other people, it's just a bunch of rich guys who hang out and talk about antiques.
Nice.
That's another group. And then, like I said, there's also the Sharn City Council, who rule Sharn. And your job will be to net these different groups to try and, like I said, get the Stormreach Beacon back, which is your goal. Because, the Stormreach Beacon is what protects Stormreach, literally.
And was stolen in this particular lead-in. So,
so there's lots of different parts of Sharn, and we will see some, but not all of them, in the expansion, because Sharn is so big we couldn't possibly squeeze it all into one expansion.
Yeah. Do you know how mapping is working in Sharn? Because DDO, this came up, I don't even know if this came up on the live stream, but one of the challenges that we've sometimes faced is vertical mapping, and Sharn is a very vertical place, right? So are we going to have any concerns about that?
We're working on that. We haven't come up with any great, perfect solution. The areas that need that sort of treatment, we're hoping we'll get a treatment that will help people navigate. Yes, Sharn is a city of towers, and towers have special issues for mapping.
Yep, sure do. Yeah.
But you will get to see Sharn towers. Sharn towers can be a mile tall. You won't get to actually climb up an entire mile tall tower, but you'll get to go inside one. And
cool.
as you might suspect, you can hold a lot inside a mile-tall tower.
Indeed. So what is sort of your particular kind of task here for Sharn, other than some of the story writing and things? Are you doing quest work?
Yes, I'm making quests, doing a bunch of writing. I've just been talking to the folks who are making our music and giving them feedback. We're going to get new music for this expansion, as we did for Ravenloft. And that's always a lot of fun because, you know, every area in the game gets some of its character from the music, and since every area is different, the music should be different, and the music for Sharn will be different than the music from Ravenloft, but equally awesome.
Nice. What can we say about voice acting? I know we want to leave one thing in particular, or a couple things in particular, unannounced.
The short answer is I don't know, because I don't know what we've announced.
We have announced nothing about voice acting. So.
Right. There will be special guests.
Yeah.
Is what I can say. So some of the voice actors will be people near and dear to folks who are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, in particular. Well, the sorts of Dungeons and Dragons you might associate with Sharn.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have a lot more about that in the near future. We just announced this week we're taking pre-orders in March, and we'll have like some pages and things like that that'll talk more about kind of the promotional hype stuff, and we'll have more information about the voice work and all that too. But it's a little early yet. We're just on the cusp of really unlocking the vault, as it were, to all that info.
This bit is tricky for a cleric.
Yes, it is. I usually like to do the kind of optional. And actually, that's a interest. Did you make this dungeon in particular, or not?
Sorry, say it again.
Did you make this dungeon in particular? I can't remember.
Yes, I did. So this dungeon was meant to do a couple of things. One is be a prequel to Sharn, but it's also like whenever you see a bunch of gameplay in rooftops in DDO, that's usually me.
Right.
So it's also a spiritual sequel to Come Out and Slay, which is the first Sharn Syndicate quest, the capstone of the Sharn Syndicate series, which takes place on rooftops.
Is it because you like kind of the urban setting in particular? Or?
Well, the whole point of DDO, particularly original DDO, was that it was set in Stormreach, in one city, Stormreach, and it seems that if you're going to have a MMO set in a city, you should take advantage of all of everything a city has to offer in terms of alleyways and rooftops and urban environment.
Sure.
Also, the fact that DDO has jumping and climbing, which not every MMO has.
One of the other pieces this dungeon has, which gets used occasionally, is sort of alternate methods to subdue these citizens in particular. Can you tell me a little bit about the thought process of how that came about and how you put that sort of thing into the game?
We like to try and give people different options, both for different types of players and also literally for different character builds. And so I wanted to have sort of two paths through this. One is just kill everything you see, and the other, which is take a few more seconds and do an optional to feel a bit more stealthy is the wrong word, but sort of rooftop adventure-y.
Yeah. Is it tough to put those kind of, because in this particular one, it's been out long enough we can kind of lightly spoil it, which is that you can actually get an NPC to subdue these folks rather than fight them. When do you make that decision that, okay, I'm gonna do this sort of thing where you can talk to this person, then you don't even have to fight any of these people?
So you usually have to make it right at the start of the dungeon because it does involve designing an entire alternate path, which is why sometimes people are like, why can't you just add this to this dungeon? And it's like, well, you would need to rebuild the whole dungeon. So making this dungeon involves designing the second path to avoid combat as part and parcel of making the whole thing. So that was sort of the premise I went in with, was I'm going to make a dungeon with 2 different paths.
Okay. Which is not also, you've done one other place I'm particularly familiar with, which is The Missing. You have kind of a multi-path thing going on there.
Sorry, say again?
The Missing, you also have kind of a multi-path thing going on there.
Missing doesn't really have multiple paths. It has some randomization. You can do things in different orders in Missing, so it's more like I'll go left first or I'll go right first.
Yeah.
But it's a similar mood in that it's the city at night, which is something I obviously like a lot. And this, in some ways, is sort of like a variation on Missing. Missing was really spooky night, and everything's terrifying from the outset. And this starts off sort of quiet and subdued. Yeah. Hey, let's go hang out, buy some food at the food stalls at the night market, and then it gets scary and threatening.
Do you write the dungeon text and sort of plot first before you kind of get into our programs and start building the space out, or do you do both of those together? Does one tend to inspire the other, or vice versa?
Actual dialogue always gets written last because you have to make it fit what actually happens in the dungeon. There are some rare times where that doesn't happen because of voice recording. Like we've already recorded something. It's like, oh, well, we can't change it then. But we try and write dialogue last. A good example of how the process works is there's that section in the night market where you have to light the lamps, where 2 things are happening. One is the guy who you find out is in charge of the Disciples of Rage later on is monologuing, and you're lighting the lamps. But it's also, that I had to cover the fact that there is this section of the dungeon you're going to come through later with content the first time through. So in other words, you have to, when you go back that way, you are dealing with a giant or not dealing with a giant, trying to get to the guy who disarms the civilians, etc. But going through it the first time, I wanted you to have something there so you'd stop and take a look at your surroundings and actually try and absorb the fact that there might be like a path up on the roof. So I put in that guy's monologue and lighting the lamps as a way to get you to slow down for a second and actually look at the environment. Well, maybe look at the environment while you were playing.
Nice.
And we got an awesome voice actor to do that monologue.
Is writing the dialogue similar to writing dialogue in other mediums, or is there something about the way you put it together in a DDO quest that sort of differentiates it from, let's say, writing a screenplay or a script or a short story?
Well, compared to writing in a TV show or a movie, our guys like monologue way more. Normal people don't deliver these kinds of monologues, which our guys do because we don't want to. We want to condense things as much as we can, so that people can play the game and not sit around waiting for us. So instead of having like a 5-minute dialogue scene, which we can't do, is not part of the DDO game, anyways. The other thing that's different though is the Dungeon Master, which really makes us different than almost every other game, where we record speech for not characters speaking in character, but for the Dungeon Master describing the dungeon. which is quite unusual, and always throws our voice actors because they're like, "What is going on here? Why are you saying, this room smells funny, or, there's a lever over there?" So we have to explain to them what a dungeon master is. The exception to this was Travis Willingham when we had him record for Slave Lords, where obviously he knew what a dungeon master was, and he was really pumped to be the dungeon master. He was like, he thought it was awesome.
Yeah. Someone has a question about when do we decide to put teleports in wilderness areas? And I don't know that, we have been around for 13 years, so, modern decision making is not reflective of decision making that was made, let's say, back in 2009, right? But what about putting teleporters in wilderness areas? Do you have is that something you tend to try to make a decision on?
So I'm getting everything out of that except for the noun. In other words, I heard put in wilderness areas. Was it teleporters? Was that the question?
Yes, teleporters in wilderness areas. We have them in Ravenloft. Some people love them. Some people don't like them because they feel it leads to less exploration. But of course, people like the convenience of it as well. So how do we decide when to put them in?
So there's a variety of factors that go into that. One is like how big is the landscape, and how rich is the landscape in terms of what you get out of it, in terms of random encounters or treasure or what have you. And in the case of Ravenloft, we did it because we had this huge and wonderful and detailed landscape that was so large, because we did it literally to the scale that was in the book.
Right.
That it took a very long time to navigate, and we were worried about people not being able to get through the story.
Now, see, like someone like me, I like it, because I like being able to just run straight to the quest, even on the first time.
Get out of the yellow circles.
Yep, stay out of the yellow circles. Yep. But there are other folks who like to run there, so we don't have we put them in for this thing, but not this one or anything like that. We don't have kind of general guidance. It's really just based on the wilderness area we're working on.
Yeah, it's based on the specifics of the wilderness area, and indeed, we're working on the wilderness area. Well, it's not really wilderness, but the landscape-like area for Sharn right now, and tweaking and massaging how transportation will work in there as we go, as we see how it plays.
So have we decided if we're doing quest teleporters or not?
There will definitely be some people who will teleport you around, but I'm not going to say they will teleport you to every quest, because we haven't actually quite determined exactly how they'll work. Because again, we're trying to get a handle on the size of the landscape and the mechanics of how you enter these quests. And incidentally, there'll be like a variety of different kinds of quests in Sharn. There will be a main storyline with main storyline quests that are, the sorts of DDO quests you're familiar with from our recent packs, like this one, the Disciples of Rage. And then there'll also be some smaller pieces of content that are quests that have XP and all that, but are not the sheer scope of a quest like this one or the last one that we're playing here.
Yeah. All right, let me see if we have any other questions here. Yeah, chat is kind of blowing up a little bit with opinions on it about that teleporters thing. Some people are like, just make the teleporters always work. And then some folks are like, no, you need to be able to get to the quest first, and then you can use a teleporter. So clearly there's always some philosophical considerations to put in there, both on the development team side and the player's personal preference.
Yeah. The main thing to realize is, personal preferences between players always differ. And then secondly, even if you love hamburgers, you can't have hamburger for dinner every single night. So one of our goals in terms of making content is to provide a variety of different kinds of, and not always do things exactly the same.
Yeah. I actually think you probably could eat hamburgers every day. It might not be the healthiest diet, but you could probably do it. So.
Yeah, you could, but my job as the guy who helps organize the menu on the restaurant is to say, hey, the special of the day today is something different than it was yesterday.
Yeah, right. Related to sort of optional ways to get through quests and things like that, what are some of the factors that lead you to add social skill features in a particular piece of content?
You mean like skill checks?
Yeah.
Often the number one component is time, in the sense that in a world where we got to spend as much time on every single quest as we wanted to, probably every quest would have some sort of skill checks. But beyond that, we're like trying to figure out how to use our scarce time. It really is, is this a quest where we'll have a big bang for the buck, or is it sort of just another menu option?
Yeah. And similar with alignment checks and that, which I don't know if we've done very much of. We just ran Prison of the Plains earlier today, and that's one of the few that's got like a hard-coded "you should be lawful good" to do this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Alignment checks are especially difficult in Eberron, where it's why is there But yeah, there's a lot of cases where I've wanted to do a skill check, but there were 4 or 5 other things I wanted to do, and I had to make a choice of I'm going to do this but not that.
Yeah.
You can tell and we have different designers on DDO, and different designers make different choices, and you can tell that from our dungeons. We each have our own sort of signature styles. I make dungeons differently than Flimsy Firewood, who makes dungeons differently than Torque, who makes dungeons differently than Steelstar. Not that Steelstar has time to make dungeons these days.
Okay. Someone's saying I can eat hamburgers every night. I actually I'm a big Frank Zappa fan. Well, kind of a big Frank Zappa fan. And I happen to know that he pretty much ate hot dogs for every meal every day for his entire life.
Wow.
And not only did he eat hot dogs, but he didn't even eat hot dogs on a bun. He would just grab the thing, stick them on a fork, put on the burner on the stove, and just nuke it over the stove fire for like 30 seconds aside, munch it, and then go back down to his studio. That was pretty much the only thing he ate his entire life. And that guy was a genius. Granted, he passed away at a relatively early age, but still. I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. I don't think this is the proper place, BTN, to ask about what a 64-bit client brings to DDO. I don't think either of us here have been working on it enough to really provide much insight to you.
Yes, I haven't.
That's an engineering thing.
On that topic.
Yep. So they take the dilithium crystals.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. Can we get Joseph Manganello, I think that's how you say it, as a DM voice? How do we get celebrity DM voices?
Sorry, you were both breaking up and I was dying, and therefore I did not catch that.
No, I was going to say someone had made a suggestion about a celebrity DM voice that we could use. How do we get our DM voice celebrities?
Well, it's not exactly magic. It's a combination of us having interest and them being interested in us.
Yeah.
So there's any number of people we would like to get who we will never get because we couldn't possibly convince them to do.
Or they might even be
DDO.
interested, but they wouldn't have the time in their schedule.
I mean, there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I would love to do that, but my agent won't let me.
Oops.
Basically because of our size and what we pay and so on. But we look for people who have some sort of connection to Dungeons & Dragons, directly or indirectly, and folks that will make people go, oh, hey, I never imagined I'd hear that person in a video game. And then, for like our regular updates, we have a stable of talented voice actors we draw.
Yep.
And occasionally, like in the case of, Travis Willingham, there's overlap.
Yep. I don't have the answer of how to become a video game voice actor. If I did, I might well be doing it. Not a bad gig, I don't think.
It's a great gig, but it is very hard to break in.
Yes.
You got the voice.
I don't know.
Yes. Well, you've got the right timbre to your voice. Good, deep video game voice.
Let's see. If you happen to know, Craig, RPH, that Joseph Manganello is a big DDO-specific fan rather than a D&D fan, and you might know this because you have a friend of a friend or a contact of a contact or something like that, get in touch with me. Let's see if... let's talk. Otherwise, if it's just sort of a generic statement, that's cool too. Yep. Someone's saying Joe Manganello specifically plays DDO. So if that's true, I would love to know that. Okay. Did I hit the chest? I did.
That was neat. Didn't have that for an arm. That's quarantine.
Nice. All right. I don't want to take too much of your time here, Knockback. What, any kind of final thoughts, things you want to mention here?
There are all sorts of cool things in Sharn that I can't tell you about.
I know, right? That's the problem. The bit of a problem all day is there's a bunch of stuff we're just not quite ready to say.
Let's just say that since Sharn attracts people and things from all over, there are going to be some things in Sharn where you're like, oh, hey, I didn't expect to see that in this update.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Knockback, for joining me here on the live stream today. Thanks to everyone in the group who joined us as well. And thanks very much for watching the 13th anniversary live stream. We are going through till midnight. We're going to take a couple-minute break to sort of change servers and change characters and get off Discord and things like that. So I'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Good to see you guys.